conversation last week about me not going to see musicals, and all of a sudden, all week long, I've been getting ads on Facebook for all the
Ah,
musicals that are coming to Salt Lake City. I'm like, okay.
Siri.
Meta
Siri.
is listening.
I don't know if you use Word Hippo.
Word Hippo, I don't. I've heard of it, but I haven't used it.
Oh my gosh, best thing ever for a writer. It's literally a website when you're like, what's another word for smile? And then they throw out like a gazillion different, and you're like, oh my gosh, thank you. Because if I had to start smiling all 17 times through this chapter, something good would not be happening. They have like ads on the right side of the screen, and I kid you not. I think I was in Google and I typed one time, I was typing in like, I don't know, microphones or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And seconds later, I was busy working and I went on to Word Hippo. What advert did I get? Microphones from every nation. I was just like, pardon, sir. See, I'm not that influential that if I see a mic there, I'm like, oh, no, have to get it now. Have to get it now.
Get it.
I mean, it takes me 15 times of a novel to feature in my feed on Instagram for me to be like, okay, guess we're reading you. So I'm like, bro, you have to really try much harder. Okay.
So what are we drinking today, Nell?
Air. I'm drinking air today.
I've got some juice from this morning.
Nice and cold.
That's right. Room temperature juice is great.
Yummy. Sarah, this is my part. The shush. Let's do it. Hello everyone and welcome to Tea and Tales. I'm Madeline now.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in to listen to our episodes. We especially want to thank Tessa Slaubert and Frankie Sutton. Thank you for commenting and interacting with us on social media.
If you were wondering whether we have forgotten about you, don't fear, because this is part 2 of our writers groups and networking with our special guest, Clare Draycott.
So let's jump right back into the rest of that recording.
Well, I love how we talk about writers because I do think they entwine with networking, because when you are in writers group, you do network with people. In this industry, networking is one of the most important things that you will be doing. And I don't know about the two of you, but I despise networking. I don't even like talking to my neighbor. Now I have to go talk to strangers. I'm like, no, thank you very much. The two of you can agree or disagree with this, but I have recently been told that I have a resting bitch face. And so when people meet me for the first time, they're like, oh my gosh, you're so rude. And like, you just look so disinterested to meet me. And then I'm like, because I was, but okay. When I do meet people for the first time, I am more reserved in the sense that I will check you out and I'm like, do I vibe with you? Because moi is a personality, okay? So I have to make sure that you can handle the personality is all I'm saying. And so, yeah, so that was besides the point, but a very good point if you want to meet me. But yes, so networking, because yes.
I say I don't think it is beside the point. I think we've all got to know where our boundaries are. Part of networking is obviously to widen the group of people that you know, and so you can help them and they can help you. But you've also got to know that those people are going to give as well as take. And so actually I think some sense of boundaries is a vital thing, as it is in anything you do in life. It's not just this networking process for writing. You've got to know, I think, what you want to get out of it as well as what you want to give to other people.
Yeah, so I think, I kind of feel it connects with social media, because a majority of the guests that we had on season 1 was actually authors that I connected with through Instagram and through Facebook. And so I think the internet is such a great or terrible place to be as a writer, because it can build you up, but it can also break you down. And I think it's a great way to network with people, especially for someone like me, who I don't have the opportunities, or you have writer conferences that you can go to. Like, we don't have that in South Africa. And I feel as a writer, that is such a great place where you can network with people, where you can find writers groups. I think for people who don't have the opportunity to go to writer conferences, then networking with people online or networking with people through groups is a great way to be doing that as well. And then I just hop on your backs because you go to conferences and I'm like, what did they say?
We can't know everything. You can't know every resource that is out there for you. And if you get stuck, but you can put out and say, I'm struggling with this, help me out, then people can say, look at this, go over here, look at that. I learned this at this conference. Because even if you have access to the conferences, that doesn't mean you have $300 every month to attend a writer's conference or the time off work to do that or anything like that. In one of my critique groups, I had made a comment on somebody's manuscript, and then he had read that comment and then was reading my manuscript and made the same comment and said, so what's the difference between you doing it here and me doing it in mine? I said, absolutely nothing. I need to fix it. I was able to get them information that I had learned just this last summer from a chat that somebody said, oh, look at this great article that I found. Oh, all the time when you're interacting with other authors to share that information.
And it is so exciting when you come across somebody who has a solution to something that you're finding problematic. Or, as you say, if you've learned something and you can pass it on knowing that that's going to transform another person's writing experience. It's a really nice feeling. What I found about the writing community in general is that the writing community is a lovely bunch of people. You know, it's a supportive community, even online. You know, the comments I get on my Facebook writers page or on my Twitter/X page are really, really lovely. And then you can see what other people are doing.
I think people also need to realize or just know that don't feel like you have to have this massive solution for someone to be able to contribute to a problem that someone has or a question someone has or something like that. Like, by simply saying, using phrases like there was in a novel, reads more passive than active, that is more than enough to tell someone, and that might help them, that might not help them. But I think sometimes I definitely get those feelings where I would be reading a post and then I would see comments people writing and I'm like, oh, but they sound so smart, so whatever I'm going to say is just going to sound stupid. Like, that's not going to be useful. And it might be that small thing that you thought to suggest that just might be the thing that clicks with them, because that's also the other thing. I think every person learns a different way. And so then you have to find a different approach or a different way to tell that person, okay, this is what I meant by this comment. And so what might work for you might work for someone else, and what might work for you won't work for someone else.
Talking before we started recording about my friend in the Philippines, who we were talking last night, and he said he got all this energy from hearing things that our guest Justine Brashear said, because she had a perspective that the other people in our writing group didn't have. We don't think that way. We don't write that way, but he does. All the things that we said and suggested were good, but it wasn't until he heard somebody else who struggles with and deals with things the same way he does that he said, I've got it now. I had one group who a lady went to a conference, loved the speaker, approached him afterward and said, hey, my Writers Association would love to have you guest speak and do a Saturday session with you. Do you do that sort of thing? And he said, yeah, here's the cost it's going to be per person. You guys figure out lunch. I can run it from this time to this time. What date do you want? And I never would have been able to do that. But because I networked into the network and she was there, she was able, and then I could go. So being able to bring out all these different opportunities when you're with writers groups.
One of the things I liked about Jericho Writers, it does have ways of getting writers in front of agents, which I think are very clever. And one of those is their first 500 words competition. And I know that in Pitch to Publish, we're always talking about the first 5 pages and trying to make sure that they shine, because that's the first thing an agent's going to read of your work. Jericho Writers has reduced that down to the first 500 words. But you submit your first 500 words. And if you're shortlisted to be in the competition, you end up reading your first 500 words on camera. Or if it's at the conference, because they do the same competition at their conference, you're up on stage in front of the whole conference reading your first 500 words. So what they run one at sort of Christmas time online, and then they run one in the summer at the conference. It's a huge opportunity because it then gets played on this event, and there's a panel of agents who give their responses. And this is where it's really clever, because you get to see how the agents are responding to those first 500 words and what kind of a sense of the work they are getting. And it's incredible how much they pull out from what is actually a very small sample of somebody's writing. And it just gives you a real insight into, one, what they're looking for, and two, just how adept they are at assessing whether something has got legs or not. And of course, if you win, then it's very encouraging, and it's something that can go in the query letter and so on. So
Yeah.
That's amazing. More people should offer that.
I would absolutely not love recording myself reading my own novel. And I think it's because, here's the thing, I don't like audiobooks, so I don't like listening to stuff, which is quite ironic because I do listen to podcasts, but it's like true crime, so I feel that's kind of a different vibe. I was struggling with a scene or something, and then I stopped my friend and I was like, look here, what's happening here? She started reading it out loud and I just cringed. I was like, that sounds terrible. I should burn my book, because what is that? Because clearly this is a dumpster fire and I should be fired before I was hired. Nobody should ever read my novel to me.
We're going to trick you into it now here on Tea and Tales.
First of all, I haven't seen any of your writing that deserves to be burnt. And secondly, I think the idea is that you hone your 500 words so much, you get them to a point where you are comfortable putting them out there. Obviously, if you're going, oh my God, I can't read this, it's perhaps not ready, in which case you do a bit more work, just to state the obvious.
Putting myself back into 2018, when I had just finished my first novel and trying to figure out how to do all of this, I definitely was not prepared for joining into writers groups, and I wasn't prepared for finding them. So my question to you is, it's kind of a two-parter. First, where would you suggest a new writer look to find a writers group? And secondly, what is the piece of advice you would give them that would prepare them?
Whichever writer group you join, obviously they all do things in their own way, but I think focus on one thing that you want to look into first. I know that when I joined Pitch to Publish, it was a bit overwhelming. There's so much going on, and it's all super duper organized. It's really easy to follow, but there was a lot of it. And I just thought, wow, okay. Because, you go from nothing to, masses of information, and it was a bit much, to be honest. I always used to say to my flute students when I was teaching the flute and they were learning a new piece, I said, break it down into small bits and tackle one small section at a time. You would not eat the world's largest pizza by trying to stuff it all in your mouth. You would cut a bit off and you'd eat that, and then you'd cut another bit off and you'd eat that. And I think it's exactly the same thing when you join a writer's group, is you decide which bit you want to eat first. When you join a writer's group, take it slow and just take the time to have a look around and then start with one thing.
I love that, because I think sometimes we think, I got to know everything right now. I need to figure everything out right now so I can pitch an agent and I can get this book out right now. And to stop and realize it's going to take time to get that book out. This is a process. It's not a write it today, publish tomorrow sort of situation for anybody.
Only it were. Yeah, no, there is no rush. With regard to finding writing groups, I think it's good old Mr. Google. Mr. Google is wonderful because they will help you find the ones that are on your doorstep, like the one that's local to me. My county has a writers group, and if you put in local writers group, it pops straight up. I've also found if you say, I am a writer, I need a writing group on Facebook, I get inundated with adverts. Take your time to read the blurbs about the different things. Go onto Twitter or Instagram and see if anyone's talking about them, and see if anyone's saying positive, nice things about them, and then make a choice. And be, as we said earlier, be aware that if you join the group and it's not a fit for you, you don't have to stay. You can go and find another one.
I did go to Google. I was looking for conferences, and it was a conference in New York, a book fair, and rights fair. What I learned really quickly was I did not know the industry well enough to understand what was going on at the conference. I didn't understand the position that publishers had and the position that indie authors had. The good thing about it was I spent a lot of time with a lot of people who were able to sit me down and explain stuff to me, because they were all there and experienced. Because a rights fair, if you don't know what a rights fair is, it's people already published who are looking to sell rights to their books to more areas, like language translations and audiobook rights, things like that. So they all already had publishers. It was not for a beginner writer who never even talked to an agent before. But there were also agents there, and I got to talk with agents, and I got to talk with people who run publishing houses. And so I was way in over my head. And so my piece of advice would be to dedicate to be a student of the industry and to learn the terms, to learn how things work. It works differently if you're indie versus traditional, but the terms are all the same.
Yeah.
So you need to know, what does it mean to have a copyright? What does it mean to have rights to audio versus English versus Spanish? So that when you go to these things, you can understand what's being said to you and you can ask questions to learn more. I will always say I loved that experience. I networked with people I thought I would never network before, and I still have business cards from some of them. I was not ready. I met a lot of top writers there signing books and giving speeches. And so that was the value it became to me.
Hearing people talk about their journey, how they got an agent, how they got published, what they're doing next, that can be really useful if you know nothing about the industry. So even if you're sat there thinking, okay, well, I haven't got anything to sell and I'm just a tiny inconsequential person who's just starting out, you can still pick up a lot. You had the common sense to talk to people and get their business cards. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's like any other profession. It's got its own language, and you have to learn that. And of course, that's one of the things that you can do in a writing group, is to actually learn what it's all about before you launch yourself into it.
Well, and it also gave me that perspective of, where does this go? Because a lot of times I hear new writers who are going to conferences and they're like, well, is this all? I'm like, no, that's the beginner writers conferences. You have this growth to go and look at these amazing things out here to aim for and to be at. I've had a lot of people recently ask me, why are you practicing to be a onstage speaker? I'm like, because I went to this conference where I saw authors being onstage keynote speakers, and I know where that can go. I'm not looking to just be at a conference talking about how to edit a first page, but to be on those other stages someday. It's like I can see that trajectory as well.
I'm a very suspicious person, probably because I grew up in South Africa, and so I don't trust anyone. And for me, the best way I would suggest for people to find writers groups is from people that you actually know. For example, I was on Instagram. A.K. McBride came onto my feed and I was like, pardon, we have South African authors? When did this happen? Your algorithm. And so I started seeing more South African writers, and I came upon Tamsin Bester, and I was posting on her feed and I was liking and commenting. Sometimes people do go check out your profile, and she was like, oh, I see you also write, if you're ever interested in doing stuff, you can go to this writers group or stuff like that. So because I think if you know someone and you kind of know what they gain from that experience, they can actually tell you okay, this is what we learn in this writers group, or this is how you go into this writers group, or something like that. Or just having someone in the inside is always fun. So I would always suggest asking people that you do know. So that's my approach to it, but just because I am a suspicious person and I don't trust stuff. This was my advice. I would say put your ego aside and be open-minded. But I had to learn to be that because this industry is so widespread and you have to network to be able to do that. And so you have to put yourself out there, you have to be open-minded, and you have to be able to, set out your work, receive feedback. It's not just going to fall onto your lap. Is also the other thing. You actually have to take the time to research agents, research conferences, to make connections with people online, to get into the writers group, to do the networking that you want to do. If you pick up a novel and then you have these little quotes at the bottom, be like, oh my gosh, this is such an amazing novel by this super famous author. And so if you do the networking for it, then you can be like, sup, Sarah Adams, can you please just do a little blurb for me for my novel? Thank you so much. Bye-bye. It seems like a small thing to do networking, or it seems like I have to go comment on this person's Instagram, or oh my gosh, I have to go like their post or something like that. But it's those small things that you do that can actually help you later in the process to be where you want to be. So I think you also have to kind of keep that in mind.
There's a lot of the times in the way you've done your writing or your editing for the day, and you've done your job, and you've done your housework, and you've cooked a meal, and then you get on social media and you think, right, now I've got to find something witty and amusing or supportive or encouraging to say to somebody. And the temptation is to just sort of switch it off and watch something on the telly. But actually to spend sort of quarter of an hour, 20 minutes just reaching out to people and writing something, just a brief comment on something that they have posted, can pay enormous dividends down the road. So it's one of those little things you've just got to chip away at. I think social media is a very positive thing, as long as you don't let it take over. If you sort of set yourself at 20 minutes on social media now and just see what's going on, and then I'm going to put it away and do something else, I think it can be a really useful tool.
But you're really good at that, Claire. I'm continually impressed by how good you are at doing your social media every day. You could teach a masterclass on how to run your writer page properly.
I just want to say, I would be on my Facebook or something, and then I would have posted someone, and then I would just be like, notification, Claire commented, and I'm like, Claire thought of me, aww. And then I'm like, that is so nice. And then my day is just better, and I'm just like, Claire.
Oh, both. Well, it's very kind of you to be so positive. I'll tell you what the secret is, if you like, Sarah. It's very easy. I don't need to teach a masterclass. I've set aside a little bit of time in the morning to go on and do something, and then a little bit of time at the end of my writing day when I've got something new to talk about, and the rest of the time I leave it alone. So that I do make sure I go on those 2 times every day, so that I'm, just constantly feeding something in, and it's just become a part of my routine, and that's it, literally all there is to it. I couldn't do an entire podcast on that, because that's it, that's all there is.
But it's working for you though. I'm watching your page just grow and grow and grow, and I'm like, she's killing it. She's doing so good.
That's very kind.
We do like to keep it short and simple here on Tea and Tales. Get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pens back on the paper.
And if you love what we're doing here, and you love what we're talking about, and you want to find your own writers group, and you want to do networking, we are the perfect place to go do that networking. And you can go follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Threads at Tea and Tales Podcast, and on Twitter/X and TikTok at Podcast Tea Tales, and go to that lovely purple icon on your device and go give us a 5 stars so that we can go up, 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 up to the top.
We especially want to thank Claire. Thank you so much for joining us today and giving your perspective on networking. You have so many great things to say, and I'm so glad that we had you here.
Oh, it's really kind of you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been really, really good fun.
For everybody else, happy writing. See you next time.
Bye!